cover two lessons, lesson 18 and lesson 24, which are both on multiplying three numbers, finding missing numbers, and the associative property. So lesson 18, our first key word is that we need to know that numbers multiplied together are called factors. So in the problem 3 times 5, both 3 and 5 are called factors. When multiplying three numbers, choose 2 to multiply first, and then multiply the, what do we call when we multiply two numbers together and get an answer? The product of those two by the third number. Now the commutative property tells me that I can change the order of the numbers if I want to. So for example, we have 8 times 3 times 5. Because this is all multiplication, the commutative property of multiplication says I can change the order. If I did it this way, 8 times 3, those are the first two I'm choosing to multiply, would be 24. And then I could do 24 times 5. But what about if I chose to do it in a different order? That might make it easier. So what if instead of doing 8 times 3 times 5, I changed the order, and instead I did 8 times 5 times 3? Well, 8 times 5 is 40, and 40 times 3 is much easier to do in my head. 4 times 3 is 12, and I just add another 0. So either way I do it, no matter what order, I'm going to get the same answer, and I can change the order because of the commutative property of multiplication, as long as we're only multiplying all of the numbers. If one of these was addition or division, then it wouldn't work. That leads wonderfully into the associative property. Remember, the associative property says that the grouping does not matter. I can change the grouping with parentheses. Parentheses, this is the P in PEMDAS. So the P right here stands for parentheses. It tells me to simplify that, what's inside the parentheses, first. So before I do any of the other steps of PEMDAS, before I do exponents, multiplying and dividing, or addition and subtraction, I always need to simplify what's in the parentheses. And if I don't do that first, then sometimes I'll get the wrong answers. Parentheses breaks a problem into parts and tells me what to do first. So here's an example: 2 times, and then in parentheses, 3 plus 4. Because they're not all addition and they're not all multiplication, I can't use the associative property of addition or the associative property of multiplication because I have multiplication and addition. So let's look at how the parentheses, where the parentheses are, gives me a different answer. If I do, I'm going to have to do 3 plus 4 first because it's in parentheses, so that's going to tell me that that's 7. And then I'm going to multiply 2 times 7, and my final answer equals 14 over here. On this side, it tells me to multiply first because it's in parentheses, so I'm going to do 2 times 3, which is 6, and then I'm going to add 4, and that gives me 10. You see, the parentheses really do matter, and they tell me that that's what the problem wants me to do first. If there was no parentheses, I would multiply before I add. Okay, if you are only adding or only multiplying, you can change the grouping to make it easier. So in this question, I have 4 times 6 times 5. And I have parentheses that tell me that I have to do 4 times 6 first. Well, 4 times 6 is 24. And 24 times 5, we already did this problem, is 120. But I can choose to do something in a different order. I can group them differently because it's all multiplication only. This is being multiplied and this is being multiplied. So instead of doing 4 times 6, I might want to change it. Then I would get 5 times 6 is 30. And 30 times 4, well, 3 times 4 is 12, and I would add a 0. So in this case, I would get 120, but I could do that in my head really easily. Or I could even group it this way. I could even do 4 times 5 times 6. So 4 times 5 is 20, and 20 times 6 is 120. 6 times 2 is 12, and add a 0. So all of these are correct. In this one, I use the commutative property and the associative property by changing both the order and the grouping, whereas in this one, I just changed the grouping around. So that is the associative property of multiplication. All right. The last part to this lesson is finding missing numbers in multiplication. So in example A, we have W times 3 equals 18. And that was reading it down. If I were to read it up, it would be 18 divided by 3 is what number? Okay, so going down is multiplication, division is the opposite, so I would read it up. I also can think, what number times 3 would give me 18? Okay, so if I did that, I'm going to think of fact families. These are a part of the same fact families. So what number times 3 equals 18? Good, 6. So 6 times 3 equals 18. Therefore, 18 divided by 3 equals 6. So W equals 6. In this one, 3 times a number equals 24. So what number times 3 equals 24? Good, 8. 3 times 8 is 24, which also tells me that 24 divided by 8 would be 3, or 24 divided by 3 would be 8. All right, in this last example, I have 3 numbers. I have 6 times 5 equals 3 times A. I need to simplify everything on the one side of the equal sign that I can first. So 6 times 5 would be 30. So 30 equals 3 times A. Or A times 3 equals 30. So what number times 3 equals 30? Good, 10. 10 times 3 equals 30. That is the same thing as saying 30 divided by 3 equals 10. All right, believe it or not, that is the entire lesson, or 2 lessons, so you are ready to get to work.